What's up, you guys? Justin Rivas here. We've gone through the basics in this playlist of talking about making technical things like aperture, shutter speed, ISO, exposure, white balance really simple and breaking them down in an easy to understand way. Well, guess what? If you actually understood those 5 things, ISO, aperture, shutter speed, exposure, and white balance, you're now ready to be in full manual control of your camera, and I think that's super exciting. And I'm going to show you how to kind of go through the basic building blocks to be able to get there, putting all those things together so that you have full control over everything that your image looks like, okay? So we're going to start at building block number 1, which you can do this slightly different in the process, but I'm going to do it right now, which is the white balance. Now to recap, that's like how blue or how orange your image is, which really we just want white things to be white, and sometimes we have to play off the light that's in a room because some lights are more orange, some lights are more blue, and what we don't want is we don't want our white things looking orange. That doesn't end up being good. We just want them to look proper. So I've gone ahead and I've set the white balance on my camera already. I can't do it while I'm recording, so that was just kind of where I started. So I've got it locked in, so it's looking pretty good based on the lights in my room. So white balance, check. The next thing that we need to do is set our shutter speed, which if you saw this video, we're just going to follow these rules and we're going to follow the ideal rules because that's what we should be able to do. So I'm shooting at 24 frames per second, so I'm setting my shutter speed double, or the closest to double I can get, which is 1/50th of a second. So I've got the white balance set, I've got my shutter speed set. I've really only got 2 things left to do to get to a properly exposed image, which again, exposure is just how bright or how dark the image is. We want it properly exposed. We've got white balance, we've got shutter speed. Now what we need to do is set our aperture. Now again, if you remember, aperture is simply how wide open our lens is, and we can dial that down. That's going to put more stuff in focus but less light. We open it wide up, we're going to get a lot more light in, but less stuff will be in focus where the background can be blurry, and typically that's what we want. So if we're going over this camera here, I want to set it so I want to blur out that Blue Jays jersey in the background, which we are starting to do here. And right now I'm seeing that the image is properly exposed. Now again, if I was going up here and saying I want that Blue Jays image to be in focus too, you can see here my image is too dark, but we've done white balance, we've set our shutter speed, we're not changing this. We've now set our aperture and say we want all this stuff to be in focus. Well, our image is too dark. Well, what do? Well, that's where we crank up the dial for brightness, which is really the ISO or ISO, depending however you want to say that. So we're going to go to our camera, we're going to go to ISO, and we're just going to turn it up until we get to a properly exposed image, which is going to be somewhere around there. And we've gone through, that's the 4 building blocks right there, you guys. White balance, shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. And we're now set up and recording a video that we've got complete control. And what's nice about this video here or this video here is that they're not changing as other things change. It doesn't matter whether the lights in the room got, you know, slightly brighter or something in the background moved, or I move out of the way and the camera picks up on the black behind me. It's not changing the settings there. It's going to remain consistent, you know, and give us the best shot at having a consistent, professional looking video. And so that's really good. But let's talk about, you know, when we get into tougher situations, which is going, hey, that Blue Jays jersey isn't quite in focus. You know, we need to keep cranking up the aperture to put more stuff in focus. Again, we just keep offsetting that by turning up the ISO. And I think that's fairly straightforward. But what happens when it's too bright and we can't actually turn the ISO down enough? So let's get back to 3.5. That is way too bright. We're going to turn down here. We're actually down to ISO 250. This is a properly exposed image that we have here at ISO 250. But if it suddenly became a whole lot brighter out, let's say the sun was shining through my roof, which isn't possible, I can actually get in a situation, this camera only goes down to ISO 200. I can't actually make it much darker than it is right now. So what are my options? Well, one is we talked a little bit about being able to cheat this rule a little bit because we can't turn down the brightness anymore. We could crank up the aperture, but in the case of this video, which I guess is a good option, we'll say that's an option, but I want the Blue Jays jersey to be blurry in the background, so I don't want to turn up the aperture, but that would be one way that we could solve and cut down the light is turn up the aperture. Our other option is we can increase the shutter speed, so we can keep kind of dialing it up again. My recommendation is to go in kind of multiples, so in this case we could go from, if we go from 1/50th here, I'm going to go to 1/100th, and I'm going to pretend that it just got brighter outside. And we're kind of back to the same like properly exposed image. but I've just doubled my shutter speed as a way to cut down on light. So that's one way you can do it, or you can adjust the aperture. Or if you're still in a situation where, let's say you're shooting with like this lens is so bright, this is a 1.4 lens, you will get yourself in trouble anytime you step outside that you basically can't shoot at 1.4 if it's bright out. Well, you can actually get our filters, which screw over the front of this, and it's called an ND, or a neutral density filter, and it basically just cuts down on the light. Think of it as like tinting your glass. Okay, and there's variable ND filters where as you turn them, they get darker or brighter. And so that's how you deal with things when it's too bright outside. But that's basically your full manual control. Set the white balance. Again, auto, it's probably fine, but especially if you're shooting multiple people or you're shooting for anything professional, you want to get that white balance locked in. You need to set the shutter speed, double your frame rate if you can. And then you're going to go to the aperture, decide how much stuff you want in focus, and then you're going to adjust the ISO to get the right level of brightness to balance those things out. Once you've done that, you're now rocking full manual. And you should be pumped. I'm Justin Rivas. Thanks for watching.